Hello everyone and welcome back. In this lecture we'll continue our discussion on functions. Let's start by writing a function that prints out odd numbers from a given list. Okay. So we start with our def statement and then name of our function. Let's say print odd, and then it will accept one argument. Let's say x. So we can say for I in range x, you can say print I. Okay, so we have our function name print odd. It accepts one argument or parameter x, and then for I in range x, print I. So what do you think this will do? If you remember from the range definition, if I say range 1 to 10, this will print out numbers 1 all the way to 9, right? I get a list of numbers from 1 to 9. But I only want, from this range, I only want the odd numbers. So how can we do that? We know that by default, range x means from 1 to x. So we can say 1 and then x, and we can say in step sizes of 2, right? So if I go back to this range function and say range 1 to 10 and in step sizes of 2, that will give me a list of the odd numbers only. So I'm doing the same thing here. So for I in range 1 to x in step sizes of 2, print I. So that will print out all the odd numbers. So we can call our function print odd, and let's pass 15 and run it. We get 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11 and 13. We could also say outside of the function definition, we can say print, and then here are the odd numbers. We can say that. So remember, this print statement is outside of this function definition, so it's independent of that. In this case, this print statement will be printed first. Here are the odd numbers, and then followed by the function call print odd, which will print out the odd numbers between 1 and 15. Let's run it again. So we have here are the odd numbers 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11 and 13. Notice that in this function definition, it only accepts one parameter, right? Or one argument. What do you think will happen if I simply say print, if I call our function print odd and then pass nothing? So if I run that, I'll get an error. It says print odd takes exactly one argument and we only gave it 0. What if I pass 2 arguments? Here it says the function accepts one argument x. What if we pass 2 arguments? Let's say 12 and 20. Run it. So here it says print odd takes exactly one argument and we gave it 2. So some errors that can be fixed by looking at the error description and then figuring it out from the description. So in this particular example, our print odd function takes one argument only, but we gave it 2. So we can go back and then correct it by giving only one argument or parameter. Now if we run it again, the error is no longer there. Next, let's look at another example. Let's write a function that prompts a user to enter integers, two integers and add those integers and display the result. So what we'll do in this function is we'll prompt for the user to enter a first integer, and then we'll prompt the user to enter another integer, and then we'll add those two integers together and display the result. Okay, let's start by the def statement and then name for our function. Let's say add. Okay, and let's prompt the user to enter an integer. So we'll use the raw input function since I'm using Python 2. Raw input enter an integer. If I'm using Python 3, use the input function or method. Instead of raw input, use input. So in Python, for Python 3 users, you can simply say input and then enter an integer. That's the equivalent in Python 3. So this will result in a string, and we need to convert that into an integer, and we can do that by simply casting it into an integer. So this method will convert our raw input, which is a string, into an integer, and we'll save this in a variable. Let's call it number. Okay, and this function will simply return the number. Okay, right now if we call our function, let's say add, what we get is, it says enter an integer. Let's say 4, enter, it returns 4. Okay, so what we have to do is prompt the user to enter two integers, right? An integer first, and then we'll prompt the user again, and then we'll take those two integers and present the sum. Okay, let's do that. So we can say, let's say print this function will add two integers. Okay, and then let's say, so let's prompt the user. So we'll call our add function, and then let's save this in a variable called, let's say, first integer, right? So that will prompt the user to enter an integer, and let's prompt the user again, and we'll save that result in a variable called second integer is equal to add. We are calling our add function, and then we can save the result in a variable called result, and then we'll add the first integer plus the second integer, which are the two prompts. Then we can print the values. Print first integer plus, or we can simply say the sum of the two integers is, then plus result. Okay, let's run this. So enter an integer, let's say 5, enter an integer, let's say 6, enter. It says cannot concatenate string and integer objects. Okay, let's cast this into a string since the result is an integer. Okay, let's run our function again. Enter an integer 5, enter an integer 6, enter. So the sum of the two integers is 11. Let's run it one more time. Enter an integer 2, enter another integer, let's say 5. The sum of the two integers is 7. Okay, just to summarize what we did. So we called our function first, which is our add function, which will prompt the user to enter an integer, and then we saved the result in a variable called first integer, and then we prompt the user again. We save the result in a variable called second integer, and then we added those two integers and then store the result in a variable called result, and then we displayed the sum of those two integers, right? And since our result variable here is an integer, we converted it into a string by casting it to a string, and then we got the result of our function, which is 7. Great. And in the next lecture we'll look at arguments or parameters. Thank you everyone.